Hi and welcome to my channel. I'm Tammy Ozturk, designer of badbobbin.com. Today I'm here to show you how to make the keychain coin pouch by Bad Bobbin. The keychain coin pouch, and it's an all-in-one project. It's all in one. It's a little coin purse, holds quite a bit, even folded dollar bills. So we put everything in there. Holds quite a bit. So little quarter keeper for those who need a little quarter keeper, little change. Everything stays, it's all there as long as you have that rivet in there. Nothing is falling out. So this is the keychain coin pouch by Bad Bobbin. It's an all-in-one hoop project, and we're going to head over and see what it is we need to make this project. So don't forget to give me a thumbs up if you enjoy it, thumbs up, and subscribe to my channel. Ring the bell, that way you'll get notifications when I come out with new videos. You can make suggestions down below, anything. Let me know how you like it, if you don't like it, what you want to see some more of. Just give me some ideas, and here I am. So let's head on over to the cutting table and see what it is we need to make this wonderful project, which is the keychain coin pouch. Alright, here we are with everything we need. We'll go through that. We're going to need a liner of some sort. I always recommend felt. It's always the most inexpensive. A thin felt. You don't want the real heavy wool felt. Just a thin acrylic felt works great. Some are using fused type fabric so they don't have a fray on them. So a lot of things we don't want them to fray, so we're finding liners that don't. I always use felt. Then we need our outer fabric, which is going to be a type of vinyl or a faux leather. I'm using a cork this time on this one. I recommend something thin, nothing real thick. I know a lot of marine vinyls, the plain ones are kind of on a thick side. If it is on the thicker side, you can always check what type of liner it is on the inside and not have this type of liner. You can just do one piece, and if it's got a nice backing to it. I know some have like a flannel type back, some have like a fleece on the backing, some have a weave that looks half decent. So you don't have to have a liner if you don't want to, if you're using a thicker, but I like to make it look nice. Presentation is everything to me. So I have my two pieces cut out, and this is 3 1/4 by 7 1/4. So it's 3 1/4 by 7 1/4 makes one of the pocket pieces. Then I'm going to have my 5 by 7 hoop. I have my cam snap pliers, or I have my press, one set of cam snaps and my awl to punch my hole. I have my scissors to cut out, and then I've got my rivet. You don't have to use the rivet if you don't want to. The rivet is always the best to use at the top where I showed you where the D-ring or the split ring goes. So I use for that one a small one, which is like the 6mm. You can also use up to an 8mm, I mean 7 up to an 8. You don't want to really go anything bigger than that. It's not going to be nice, and you won't be able to open the pocket as well. My rotary cutter was just to cut that. I don't need that afterwards. Everything will be cut by hand. My inexpensive 99-cent scissors. Tape. You are definitely going to need tape because we're going to be turning it under, and you need to tape it down. So as for the D-ring, split ring, if you want to use this, I don't recommend the smaller one, which is the 5/8. You're going to need the larger one, which is like 3/4 of an inch. The larger D-ring split lobster claw will need to be the larger one, which is like a 3/4 inch. And then the split rings, it really doesn't matter which size you want to use for the split ring on this. And we're headed over to the machine. Okay, we're at the machine. And unload. I'm going to put my hoop in the machine. Everything's already loaded, the pattern in my machine. Must be on tearaway. And my first stitch is going to be my placement stitch. And I'm using the bobbin, the same color as the top. Try, since both sides are going to be seen, the top and bottom stitching, you want to try to get a clean look. So usually the white pre-wound bobbin and the white top is going to look your best. I'm doing it in black, so I have pre-wound black bobbins. You know how sometimes that bottom thread just doesn't look very well. So this is kind of why we're doing the pattern the way we're about to do it. So let's do our placement stitch. Alright. And the next thing we're going to do is I'm going to turn it over. I'm going to trim these threads. I'm actually going to singe it because I don't want them sticking out. Okay. So I'm going to put my my felt on the bottom, and I'm going to use a tacky spray to put my felt on the bottom. Alright. And I line it up, make sure I'm covered over all my, flip it over real quick, I pat it down a little bit just to make sure it's stuck, that it's on there really good. And you can see that it's placed like right in between my lines, all lined up. Then my next piece is going to go on the top. I'm going to do the same thing here, so I'm going to use a tacky spray. And I'm going to tack it, or line it up right evenly. There we go. And then the same, so in the case where we don't use a liner, if that's what you choose and you're using a thicker vinyl and don't want the liner, then you wouldn't put the piece on the bottom, and I wouldn't use a tacky spray. That way you can get that stabilizer off of there when we make it and complete the project. Here, the stabilizer is going to be sandwiched in between and sewn. So everything's tacked down. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to stitch the tack down for this. There's going to be a placement line for the snap. I'm also going to have little lines that are guide lines to where we need to do our folding and line it up. And I'm going to let it go. The very last step, I will pause it, and that's when we're going to do the rest and have our finished step. Okay. So this is the tricky part. This is the part that may not be for everybody. You need to be gingerly at this part and careful. So I want to get some pieces of tape ready. So I'm going to use, you know, about 2 to 3 inch length tape. Masking tape, clear tape, whatever's going to stick the best, because this is where we're going to be on our tricky part. So here's where, this is where we need our scissors. So carefully, we're going to score the tearaway. So I scored it with my scissors a little bit so that we can get part of this project, which is this lower part here. This part here is the part that we're going to take out of our stabilizer. So we're going to tear it up carefully. Just start with the corners. You don't want to go too far. Cut our corner, cut the stabilizer. And I've cut it just up to where it hourglasses in, and this is where we're going to make our fold right here. You can see it. So right here is where we're going to make our fold, and our fold is going to go down under. So made it just tore it up just enough, but the rest is still in. So this is where why we're being careful. We just want this part. And what we're going to do is carefully we're going to cut this out. This is important. This needs to be cut out first. There's not really a way that's going to make it look nice if we cut this out afterwards, because it's going to be sewn together. So we need to cut this curve out beforehand. So I'm carefully going to turn so I have the right leverage, and I'm going to cut, and I'm going to pretty close to my line, about, you know, an 1/8, 1/16 with the curve, and do a nice cut. And we want to go all the way through. It'll be a little better when you do this on your own. I'm just trying to keep my hand out of the place. So we want it to cut all the way through like that. We want to keep the curve going. So we're going to start with our curve and end with a curve. Alright, get rid of that little piece there. So I have my nice curve here, and if you want, you can cut some of this to do your lining up, but you don't really need to if you've cut this, you know, with just this amount. It should work. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold this piece under, and the reason why I'm folding it under is because this is the part that's going to be seen the most, and I want this to have the nicest stitch. And usually on pretty much every machine, your top stitch is your nicest stitch. Underneath where the bobbin stitch is, it's not always the best looking stitch, so that's why I do things with my nicest stitch on the outside of my project. So I'm going to flip it over, and I'm on the back side here. So I have these guidelines here, and then we're going to, these curve stitches are going to line up, if I can get it, I'll get it to line up and then I'll show it to you. So we can cut off a little bit of the tabs here so we can see our line up stitches. Okay, so hopefully you understand this part. So this is going to come up, and you're going to try to guide them so that as if they're coming straight up and following the stitch line that we're following. You know, it's going to follow. And then these guidelines that are sewn out are basically where the tip is going to match up with that line. So you'll see as we fold, and then you also want to make sure down here we're right at that fold line. We don't want to go too much under or over. So as we fold it up, we want to make sure, because it's going to sew right to that point. So where that hourglass point comes in is where we want to do our fold. We want to make sure we're lined up so that the stitches line up here, because as it sews, it's going to sew over these lines, and we want to make sure they match up. So I'm going to line it up, make sure I'm folded in the middle. Make sure my lines. And then I'm going to take my tape, I'll show you when I'm done, and I'm going to tape the sides, because this is where you want to make sure it's taped and right perfect. And then I'm going to use a little piece and once you make these a couple times, you'll get the idea of where you need to line things up. There we go. So once I've folded it up where I need to go, I'm taping both sides down. Everything's lined up. My this guideline here, the tip of this is right at that guideline. My stitching is continuing, so it's lined up here. And then I tape this down too to keep it down. So if you want to put tape all across, it's fine. I have it just inside because there's no stitching here. The stitching is only going to go around here. So I have everything taped down. Once it's taped and secured and you're pretty sure you're lined up, we're going to flip it back over and do a little press to crease this a little bit, make sure our tape is stuck down, that nothing's going to shift and move on us. So this is a little tricky part, but once you get going on it and you do it a couple times, then you'll be a pro. So you just want to make sure you're folded right in half on here. And this is why we don't use a thick vinyl. You don't want something really thick, because we're doing this fold over. And now it's going to sew through, you know, 2 layers of vinyl. Some machines may not be able to do it. Just be a little careful. You want to use a new needle. And don't want to be too thick. And I'm going to put it carefully back into my machine. That's probably the longest part of it, is trying to set that up and guideline it and make sure everything's working good. Alright, and our last step is going to be a triple stitch, bean stitch, how we call it. And it's going to, it will run off the back here a little bit. You'll see it come off, which is fine. That's where we take our little lighter and we just singe it really quick to kind of knot it up a little. Moment of truth. Let's see how we did. So the top part is good because we know we were already lined up where we were. So here we're going to find out if the bottom, see how it turned out. Ready? Not too bad. Perfect lineup right on top of the other stitching. The old stitching came out perfect to the rest. We'll take that tape off the middle real quick just so you can see how it lined up. Everything looked good. My cutting could have been a little better, but like I was saying, I was trying to cut showing on the camera, so I couldn't hold it very well. So you won't have a camera to worry about. You'll be cutting this a little better than I did, but everything lined up great. We'll take you back to the cutting table and show you how I finish it off. Alright, we're going to finish our coin. I'm going to call this the little coin purse. Coin pouch? I don't know. So everything lined up, we're good. I'm going to go ahead and unhoop it and tear away the stabilizer. Okay, now I'm going to trim some of my threads. And these ends here, like I said, we're going to go ahead and trim a little bit. You don't want to completely trim it. I'll tell you why. We're going to use our lighter to go ahead and singe the ends a little bit, and that gets it to melt up, ball up, almost like making a knot at the end of it. When you singe it up, it makes like a little melted ball of your thread, so it's almost like as if you tied a knot. So I did that to the ends there. The next thing we're going to do is go ahead and cut it out. Okay, now I'm going to trim some of my threads. And these ends here, like I said, we're going to go ahead and trim a little bit. You don't want to completely trim it. I'll tell you why. We're going to use our lighter to go ahead and singe the ends a little bit, and that gets it to melt up, ball up, almost like making a knot at the end of it. When you singe it up, it makes like a little melted ball of your thread, so it's almost like as if you tied a knot. So I did that to the ends there. The next thing we're going to do is go ahead and cut it out. 1/8 of an inch away from the stitch line. Alright, we're all set. Cut around. And our next thing we're going to do is, before we do the rivet and the ring part, I'm going to add the snaps. It just makes it easier because once we add that rivet, it's just hard to get inside. So the next thing we're going to do is add our snaps. So I'm going to take my awl, punch the hole in the center for my top. Make sure it's seated in, and I'm going to add my male side. Use my hand press or my table press. I do have videos on how I use the different tools for the different things. You can go ahead and watch that video. And I'm going to make sure it's seated in. And I'm going to use the edge of my table, and I'm going to lay this on the edge of the table and lean down on it to give it that little extra push. And there we go. That one worked great. Oh, I forgot. I just messed up. But so if we're going to use the D-ring, you're going to fold it and add that first. I don't know if we'll be able to get it. Oh, it did slide over, so you'll be able to get it on, but normally we're going to put our rings on first. So, well, we do mistakes. Even I make mistakes. So you'll learn by my mistakes. There we go. So the smaller one, that 5/8 one, is just too small and won't even fit. You'll see that it's just not, I mean, you can try to squeeze it in and cut it down, but your better bet is to buy the right D-ring tools or lobster claw. So if you want to do the lobster claw with the D-ring, you're just going to fold your sides in, and you're going to go ahead and slide that on, and then it'll work that way. Or if you want, I'm going to go ahead and use the split ring, and so you can use either size. Just slip that on. There's a smaller one. I like the bigger size, the 1 1/4 or 1 1/2. I mean, the larger size ones work great. So we're going to go ahead and put that on. I usually put that on ahead of time before we do our snaps. In this case, we didn't need to if we use the split ring. So my next one I'm going to do will be the bottom snap. And we're going to go ahead and poke our hole. Okay. Careful getting the all the way through. There we go, that you don't poke yourself. We'll add our cap. A little tricky getting that inside and poking it through the hole. And we'll add our female piece. I always have the female on the receiving side of any project, and the male is always on the flap or the snap tab part. Same thing, we're going to get our tool, a little tough, whoops, I got my snap, alrighty, here we go. So a little tough on this one. We're going to widen the pouch, going to be a little tight, trying to get the tool in, and once we get that tool in, it'll seat just fine. So there we go, see, just enough. And everything's seated, and I'm going to do the same thing again. Use my table for leverage. There we go. It snaps perfect. Unsnap, snap. I always do this a few times just to make sure that everything's going to work right and my snaps don't fall apart before I finish my project. Alright, so once we have the snap down, which is better to have that snap because then it's going to give us the closure that we need and the stability of keeping this together. So I'm going to use my 6 millimeter rivet. I have the leather punch tool that I'm going to use, and I'm actually going to go a little bit lower. There we go, one down for my 6 millimeter. I'm going to use the 3 30" to punch my hole. Or you can use the tool. This tool has 2 sides divots because it comes with the case with different sizes. So the 6 millimeter is on one size, and then the other side is for your 8 and 10. Same tool with the divot on one side, no divot on this side. We want to use the divot side because that's where your cap is going to fit. We don't want to smush or damage the cap. So I'm going to do the smaller side and have my tool and my hammer ready. So I'm not going to use this tool. This you would use with either a block of wood or a bunch of newspaper underneath and hammer this through. It works both ways, and if that's the case, then what you would want to do is you're going to try to go through 4 pieces, so you're really going to be pushing hard to get that to go through. So I'm going to use my leather punch, and I don't want to get real close that this won't move, but close enough that it's going to keep stability, and then enough that it's not too far down, so that when this is open, there's still room to get in there, but yet it's closed down enough that nothing's going to fall out. Pennies, dimes, quarters are not going to fall out. So I'm going to keep that snapped, and I'm going to take my tool, line it up right in the center, between the two, and making sure there's enough room for this to slide. There we go. And I'm going to go ahead and use the table, and you'll hear it snap, and that way you know it's all the way through. And there we go. And it's really not that bad. I'm going to just put a little leverage, and it goes right through. And there's the hole. Perfect. We're going to take our long piece on the top, put it through, and the cap will snap on the bottom. Like I said, I do have other videos on how all this is attached in more detail. So I'm going to just go ahead and attach the small one here. I'm going to make sure that it's seated properly on the bottom. And my tool with the divot side is going to be seated on the top. I want to make sure everything is really good and in there. Hold it down firmly so that it's not going to slip or slide on you. And then I have a small hammer. I don't have a really big, I do have a bigger hammer. This one here. but no need for it. I'm just going to show you this is a smaller hammer. There's not a whole lot needed for this, so I'm going to make sure it's seated. I'm going to hammer it, and I'm still holding it steady. Couple little hammers, and it's perfect. All set. It's in up. No, sometimes we get cheap ones. So actually, this one is. Sometimes here's another mistake. You kind of get what you pay for. So this one was actually, I mean, I'm sure they're all pretty much the same sets, but this one's from China. But I'll do it again. Put a new rivet in there. So I've got my hole. This one goes through the top. And here we go with the back side. This one doesn't even want to snap. There we go, that one snapped in. So we've got a couple layers here, which is fine because the shank is long enough for it. I just need to give it a little bit more. I didn't want to make too much noise, so there we go. So this time there's going to be a little bit more noise to make sure I do hammer it. There we go. Now we're good. This one I know is good. It went all the way through. Both sides are still good. Awesome, and it snaps closed. There we go. So with these ones, I needed a little bit more, hammering to it. This is what happens when it didn't hammer right. So kind of learning. So it went crooked. So it didn't hammer in properly, and I didn't get it, you know, hammered properly. So learning and seeing what happens. I'm here to show you the good, the bad. So this one did go well. We hammered it a little bit harder, so we learned. And snap works great. It's open. I can put stuff in it. I didn't have any change, but that went in, so perfect. And that's our little keyring coin pouch. So our keyring coin pouch. Thanks for joining me. Thanks for watching. Watch my other videos to see more on how to use the other tools. And subscribe, thumbs up, thumbs down. Prefer the thumbs up, please. And any suggestions of more things you'd like to see or more things explained to you, I'm here. I'll work on it and get things done for you. And you'll get more notifications if you ring that bell. And we'll see you next time. Meet you at the cutting table.